Legend says it happened outside a roadside bar on the edge of a small Texas town, back when Chuck Norris was still just a quiet man with calloused hands and a reputation that hadn't yet caught up to him everywhere he went. Nobody filmed it. Nobody got a single photograph. But the story is still told the same way in gyms and dojos across the state. A drunk man shoved a stranger outside that bar, and 5 seconds later, he wished he hadn't. The stranger he shoved didn't introduce himself. He didn't have to. Picture the scene the way it's always described. A gravel parking lot lit by one flickering neon sign, a jukebox bleeding out through a cracked door, the smell of beer and dust hanging in the warm night air. Pickup trucks lined the lot in crooked rows, their beds rattling with empty bottles from a long Friday night. It was the kind of bar where every regular knew every other regular, where the bartender kept a baseball bat behind the counter, not because he'd ever needed it, but because some nights felt like the kind where he might. That night felt like one of those nights before anyone even understood why. His name doesn't matter. The story never bothered to keep it. What matters is what he was. Big through the shoulders, loud through the chest, the kind of drunk who got bigger with every glass he emptied, like the alcohol filled out some hollow place in him that sobriety never could. He'd already needled 2 strangers that night, already bumped a pool table hard enough to scatter the balls and send a half-finished beer sliding off the felt. He'd already laughed too long and too loud at his own jokes, the kind of laugh that dares the room to disagree with him. Nobody at the bar wanted trouble with him. Trouble with a man like that wasn't worth the bruises, and everyone there had learned that lesson at some point or another. Here's what nobody in that parking lot understood yet. The quiet man leaning against his truck, arms crossed, waiting for a friend to finish a phone call inside, wasn't quiet because he was passive. He was quiet because he'd spent decades building a stillness most people mistake for softness. Chuck Norris didn't look for fights. He'd long since stopped needing to prove anything to anyone, in a bar or anywhere else. But stillness, to a drunk man swimming in his own ego, doesn't read as peace. It reads as an insult. It reads as a man who isn't afraid of him, and there are few things a man like that hates more than not being feared. Inside, somebody had said the wrong thing about a hand of cards, or maybe it was a woman, or maybe it was nothing at all. The story has never agreed on the spark, only on the fire it left behind. What's certain is that the drunk man stormed out into the lot first, mid-argument with the night air itself, still looking for someone, anyone to blame for a night that had stopped going his way. He saw Chuck standing there, calm, arms crossed, gaze somewhere off toward the horizon, not even glancing his direction, and something about that calm offended him more than any insult ever could have. A man who wasn't watching him felt in that drunken moment like the worst kind of disrespect.
"You looking at me?" the drunk barked, already closing the distance in 3 uneven, gravel-crunching steps. Chuck hadn't been looking at him at all. That didn't matter. The truth rarely does to a man who's already decided what story he wants to tell himself. The drunk's hand came up and shoved him, flat palm into the chest, the kind of shove meant to announce dominance before a single punch was even thrown. It was meant to make Chuck stumble back, maybe drop his keys, maybe show the smallest flicker of fear that the drunk could carry back inside like a trophy. It was meant to be the opening move of a fight the man was already certain he'd won. Chuck didn't move an inch. Ask yourself this. How many men standing in that lot, drink still in hand, watching from the open doorway, actually understood what they were looking at in that moment? Almost none of them. To them, it was just a drunk picking a fight with some quiet stranger by a pickup truck, a Friday night curiosity, nothing more. Nobody there had any idea they were about to watch a piece of Texas folklore get written in real time, in a gravel lot most of them had parked in 100 times before, without a second thought. The drunk shoved him again, harder this time, emboldened by the silence, by the absence of fear he expected and didn't get. "You deaf?" I said. He never finished the sentence. What happened in the next 5 seconds would get repeated in that town for years afterward, exaggerated a little more with every telling around a campfire or a bar top, but never losing its essential shape, the way only the truest legends survive. Chuck's hand came up almost lazily and caught the man's wrist mid-shove, turning it, not violently, not cruelly, just precisely, the way a key turns a lock that's been waiting all night to open. The drunk's whole body followed the motion because it had nowhere else to go. His balance, his momentum, every ounce of borrowed confidence the whiskey had given him, all of it got redirected in one smooth motion that looked less like a fight and more like physics finally collecting on a long overdue debt. 1 second. The drunk's eyes widened as his own arm betrayed him, twisting somewhere his shoulder had never asked to go. 2 seconds. His feet crossed each other in a stumble he never saw coming, gravel skidding under boots that suddenly didn't know which direction was forward. 3 seconds.
His shoulder dropped low, his free hand grabbing for air that wasn't there, for a balance that had already left him behind. 4 seconds. A clean sweep at the ankle, not a stomp, not a strike, nothing that could be called violence by anyone watching, just a redirection, the kind of subtle adjustment that turns a falling man into a man who was always going to fall. 5 seconds. The drunk hit the gravel flat on his back, dust kicking up around him in a small cloud that caught the neon light. The wind knocked clean out of his chest in a single audible huff that the whole parking lot heard. The entire exchange had taken less time than it takes to light a cigarette, less time than most arguments take just to get started. Silence dropped over that lot like a held breath. A few men who'd wandered out the door expecting to watch a real fight realized almost too late that there hadn't really been one. Just a question asked by a fist, and an answer delivered by someone who'd clearly answered that exact question 1,000 times before, and saw absolutely no reason to make a show of it now. The drunk man lay there blinking up at the stars, the fight completely gone out of him, replaced by something closer to confusion than pain. He hadn't been hit, not once, not anywhere. He couldn't even say exactly what had happened to him. 1 second he'd been shoving a stranger who wouldn't even look at him, and the next he was flat on his back, wondering if the ground itself had simply opened up beneath him out of spite. Chuck adjusted his jacket, glanced down at the man without a trace of anger or satisfaction, and said something the story has never agreed on word for word. Something short, something almost gentle. The kind of line a man says when he isn't trying to humiliate anyone, just trying to close a door before it swings open into something worse. Some versions say he told the man to go home and sleep it off. Other versions say he simply asked if he was all right, which somehow stung the drunk's pride even more than an insult would have. Then he turned, walked back toward his truck, and waited for his friend like nothing at all had happened, because to him, nothing much had. It was a Friday night, a stranger had made a poor decision, and the night was continuing on exactly as it had been before the shove ever happened. That's the part of the story people always come back to. Not the fall, not the 5 seconds, but the calm that followed it. No gloating, no standing over the man to make sure everyone saw. By the time the bar door swung open wider and the rest of the regulars spilled out to see what the commotion had been, the drunk was already being helped up by 2 of his friends, dusting gravel off his jacket, muttering something about a loose rock, about tripping over his own boots.
Word didn't travel through any kind of official channel, because there was nothing official about it. There was no police report filed, no headline in the local paper, no photograph to pin the moment down for good. It traveled the way the best stories always do, mouth to mouth, barstool to barstool, one cousin telling another cousin who swore up and down he'd heard it from somebody who'd actually been standing in that lot. By the following month, the story had drifted 2 counties over, picking up new details the way a river picks up silt, the way every legend does on its way downstream. Some versions say the drunk man never set foot in that bar again, too embarrassed to face the regulars who'd watched him hit the gravel. Other versions say he came back sober exactly 1 week later, hat in hand. Whether every detail happened exactly that way or not, the story has long outlived the men who first told it around that bar. Skill doesn't announce itself before a fight breaks out. It doesn't shove first, and it doesn't raise its voice in a parking lot to prove a point. It simply answers, calmly and completely, whenever it's finally called upon. And then it walks back to the truck and waits for a friend, like nothing much happened at all. If you want more legends like this one, the kind that get passed down because nobody ever quite agreed on every single detail, but everyone somehow agreed on exactly how it ended, stick around.